Ready? Start out with some no-lift shifts. Why not? Welcome to Car and Driver. We've just wrapped up a long-term test on this Cadillac CT4-V Blackwing, and that means we drove it 40,000 miles in about a year or so. Now, if you've been watching this series, you know that we've done the same with the Cadillac CT5-V Blackwing, but you should also know that this car's test overlapped with the long-term test of a manual BMW M3. We'll make comparisons to those vehicles in this video, but before we do that, you should know that the long-term test is all about demonstrating what a new car is like to live with over the first few years of ownership, the highs, the lows, the maintenance, the repairs, and so on. To do that, we drive the car like any owner would, but of course we aim for a lot more miles in the course of a year. We also do cross-country road trips, we go to racetracks, and so on and so on. We also have our fair share of oopsies as well. Let's get started. As for what we got and what it costs, the first decision we made was to get a 6-speed manual transmission. Not only was this a boon to driving enjoyment, it also saved us $3,000 roughly versus the automatic. As for color, we went with electric blue, and that was $625. Matching blue brake calipers were roughly $600, and those bronze 18-inch wheels were another $1,500. As for the interior, we got a package that added these bucket seats. They came with this gray leather center part. There's microfiber-like suede throughout the interior and a performance steering wheel, and that package was $4,900. Getting these seats with heating, ventilation, and massage was another $600, and the as-tested price of this vehicle came out to a hair over 68 grand. Not fun. It's never not fun. So that money gets you a lot of car, and specifically we mean the hardware. So the engine, 472 horsepower twin turbo V6. Now at our test track, when we first tested this car, that was good for 60 miles an hour in 4.1 seconds, and the quarter in 12.6 seconds. This thing also went around our skid pad at 1.01 G, courtesy of its Michelin Pilot Sport PS4 tires. Compare that to our long-term manual green M3. That car was slightly quicker by 0.2 of a second to 60 and 0.4 of a second at the quarter mile. The M3 also posted a slightly better skid pad result, but this car was $10,000 less. That's a sizable difference. As for the transmission, much like with the CT5-V, the manual was the right choice. The shifter has excellent precision, really good feel, and it just overall adds to the engagement of the driving experience in this car, especially when you remember that this car has no lift shift. That's a feature that allows you to keep the gas pedal pinned when you're doing a really quick upshift. And in most cars, that breaks things, but in GM's high performance stuff where that feature is built in, it's really, really fun. In fact, our testing director, Dave Vanderwerf, quoted saying, "There's nothing much better starting the day than a no lift shift in the CT4." He's right. So overall, this was a car that our team would make excuses to drive, and that's because we loved the driving experience. On a 2-lane twisty road, this thing is really, really fun. It's quick, it's nimble, it's communicative, it's really enjoyable. That's courtesy of an engine that makes loud, boisterous noises as you can hear it burbling and backfiring right there. Sure, we wish it had a V8, but hey, it's a V6 and it's not really a bad one either. car also has a ton of traction in those tires and a lot of confidence courtesy of the electronic integration happening from the differential to the stability control settings. We haven't even talked about performance traction management, which is this multi-mode adjustment that gives you varying levels of stability control intervention that you can adjust to your level of driving skill or your confidence. It's something that helps you learn how to drive the car more quickly, not something that's punitive in nature like a lot of stability control systems used to be. But what's really nice about this car though is once you exit the 2-lane twisty road and hop on the freeway or start doing the commute, this car has a chameleon-like ability to blend in with its settings, right? So you change the drive mode to tour, the engine gets quieter, the ride gets softer courtesy of those Magna Ride dampers, and this thing becomes a docile car. In fact, it becomes downright comfortable, more so we thought versus our M3, especially over broken Michigan pavement. And maybe that's because this car's manufacturer is based in Michigan. Seems reasonable to me, right? But what's nice is even when you're in the softest, most comfortable settings, this car still has that degree of nimbleness, and that gives you this constant feeling of athleticism. Like when you're on the freeway just cruising along and you notice somebody's driving too slow or not really paying attention to the road, you can make a dynamic lane change easily to get around them. There's nothing that feels like it's limiting the vehicle. And when you factor in comfy bucket seats and that we averaged 20 mpg over the course of our test versus the EPA's rating of 18 mpg combined, that makes this an excellent long distance commuter. What didn't we like? Well, most of our complaints were with the interior. None of them were big though, they were all just kind of small. We're gonna go from least complaint to most complaint, I guess, if that works. The smallest complaint had to do with this sky cool gray leather interior. It died kind of quickly from blue jeans like the kind that I'm wearing right now, but that's kind of what happens with interior of this color. The other complaint was the interior noise. It's a little windy in this cab. There's a bit more noise than we'd expect, and the engine can kind of drone at high speeds, like if you're cruising at 80 miles an hour or so. The biggest complaint everyone had was with the back seat. This is kind of a smaller vehicle versus its competitive set, and that makes the back uncomfortable. Most of our team agreed that it was tolerable for short drives, but the longer the drive goes, the more claustrophobic it feels. And that's just not something for adults either. One of our staffers, middle schoolers, even complained about having to sit back there. So the hardest part about winter in a Cadillac CT4-V Blackwing is finding winter tires, specifically for the rear. This is a 275/35 ZR18, and that's an unusual tire size, evident by the fact that there are no winter tires available in that size. So what do? You got a couple options, and none of them are particularly great. You can't stretch a front tire size over this rear wheel because this rear wheel is so much wider. You can't go down in wheel diameter because then you start interfering with the braking system. We asked Cadillac, and their engineering team recommended that we go to a 265/35 tire. And then you have some options. But when we went to order them, they were hopelessly back ordered. So then what? Well, when it starts snowing in Michigan, what did we do? We sent this car to live in California for a few months, where it had a steady diet of tacos and yoga. But just as the Cadillac was getting its beach body, we found a discontinued set of Nokian Hakkapeliitta R3 winter tires on eBay, of all places. So we ordered those and called the CT4 back home to Michigan. After putting the tires on and setting out in winter, we just discovered that the car was totally fine. There were no issues driving this thing in the snow. You wouldn't want to challenge 4 inches of fresh powder of anything, of course, but a light dusting or just a cold day, this car was totally fine. The only downside was the addition of a slight hum to the interior, which already isn't very quiet, and that came courtesy of the chunky tread pattern of those Nokian tires. The long and short of it is, if you want to drive your CT4-V Blackwing in the snow, you totally can. Just order your winter tires now. As for service, we had 4 scheduled visits, and they were for the usual stuff like oil filter, cabin air filter, and inspection. We also a couple times topped off the washer fluid and had new wiper blades installed, and on average, each visit cost us $130. So the service visits were cheap, but unfortunately, there were a couple of repair issues that were our fault that weren't cheap. Just like with our CT5-V Blackwing, our CT4 had at least one rather unpleasant interaction with nature. In fact, a day after our CT5 was hit by a deer, our CT4 hit a turkey vulture while doing 144 miles an hour during testing. It was a pretty grisly sight, as you can imagine. The repair required repairing the A-pillar, side view mirror, trim, and repainting. That took 14 days and cost a little over $4,100. Lastly, you've probably already noticed this bit of damage here. It's unfortunate. It came courtesy of a momentary misjudgment of a curb. Hey, stuff happens, right? Unfortunately, it also happened late in our test too, so we didn't have time to get it repaired. We did get an estimate though, and that was a little under $2,300. So should you ever have the same thing happen to your car, that's how much you can expect to pay. Because we tested the CT4-V Blackwing concurrently with a CT5-V Blackwing, it was really easy to draw comparisons between the vehicles. And in many ways, this is a smaller, less expensive, and less powerful version of that vehicle. That doesn't lessen the driving experience though. In fact, there were a few people on staff who preferred this vehicle's smaller size and lower weight and the nimbleness that comes with those attributes versus the CT5. Would this car be better with a V8 and more back seat room? Sure, it would also be better without the damage we incurred that was very obviously our fault. Here's the thing, overall, this was a terrific sports sedan, one that was equally comfortable on the commute as it was enjoyable on a twisty road. It's a car we never tired of driving.